The Thrilling 32 is back and better than ever. Another record group of voters have submitted their rankings and the results are in. The best 32 wood and 32 steel roller coasters as voted by you, the fans, are ready to battle for the championship belt. Last year, the Voyage from Holiday World won its 6th consecutive wood coaster title, while Steel Vengeance from Cedar Point reclaimed its crown as the Steel Coaster King. Who will win this year? It's time to find out who this year's contenders are. It's the Thrilling 32 Bracket Challenge, and it starts right now with the Thrilling 32 Selection Show on this very special episode of COASTER-net Uncut.
Throughout time, roller coasters have come and gone. Only some become legends for their intensity and thrills. Each and every year, coaster fans like you venture to the parks, searching for that one special ride that stands out above the rest. You submitted your rankings, and now it's time to reveal the group of elite roller coasters that you have voted as the best of the best. COASTER-net Uncut is proud to present the return of the Thrilling 32.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Thrilling 32. That's right, Andy, we're finally back, you and me together. I survived COVID-19 in 2023 from Europe. Half the coaster crew came home sick, but it's okay because we're back for another great year of the Thrilling 32. It's been a long time since we've been here once again, but we are back.
You know, it got a little dicey there. We weren't sure if you were going to make it. We were already anointing Jeff the new Thrilling 32 guru, but luckily we didn't have to make the big
that
switch.
Can't happen because he still ranks El Toro at the top, so we couldn't let that happen.
It would be a big philosophical switch, almost, you know, going from like a Democrat to a Republican president, be a big philosophical.
Oh, no. This would be far more dramatic than that.
Far more dramatic, far more interesting too, maybe. But anyway, we are back here for the Thrilling 32, as we always like to say, our favorite time of the coaster year, your favorite time of year as well. And Danny, I think we got some big surprises here. I'm really excited, and I think we're gonna launch with a big surprise right off the bat here, aren't we?
Yeah, if you've noticed, the introduction is a little bit different again than it has been the last couple of years, and you'll notice that we haven't called this what it's been called the last few years. Andy, the brackets are back. The Coaster Rumble is no more for now. We're going back to traditional head-to-head brackets this year for this year.
Just when you finally figured it out. You finally figured out the Rumble. You finally figured out how to pick those matchups, how to rank those matchups. We said, screw it. We're going back to the brackets.
And guess what, Andy? No more random number generators and random order generators for the bracket. No, we have transferred the diabolicalness from the Thrilling 32 Coaster Rumble into the bracket. So for the first time in, let's see, what is it? The 12-year history of the Thrilling 32 now, for the very first time ever, we will have traditional head-to-head brackets with matchups that are not random.
That are not random, meaning that, Danny, you sat down and said, how can I really screw these people over this year? And how can I make
this... I did my research. You know, you all do your research. I did my research. I looked at what some of the trends are and maybe went with some of the trends, went against some of the trends. I looked at the matchups in the past that have really thrown off some of the voters and the participants over the years. I even had some outside help in making some of these matchups as well. I solicited some third and fourth parties as well. So this is not just my doing here that we will see tonight.
So that's interesting. So might we say that this could possibly be, and so this is already the longest continuously running theme park and award show in the history of the industry, the longest running continuously right now, currently. But this here, might we say, might be the greatest bracket ever, the hardest bracket ever, the most challenging bracket challenge we have ever put in front of you guys, our loyal COASTER-net followers, because we said, why not? Why not?
Why not us, right? And why not now?
Why not now? And I just want to see the tiers. And I think that's almost what we go for at this point, is how many tiers can we make as we fill out these brackets, and hopefully, and we got some big surprises too. We got a whole new input system of how we're going to use, how you guys are going to submit your brackets to enter the bracket challenge. That's going to give us a whole lot of data and a whole lot of things that we get to talk about moving on into these shows here to find out what you guys are kind of thinking. We got the AI trying to get into your minds and trying to pick apart your thoughts.
Yes, the wonderful New Year's cards that went out to the patrons were AI generated. So we're digging deeper into the ether of technology as we grow older and older by the day here.
Well, people have always accused us of being brainless, even though we are the most educated of all coaster shows on YouTube. I don't think there is any other coaster show that has as much education as me and you do, but they all call us idiots anyway. So we figured might as well use the AI and see what the AI says.
With age comes wisdom or lack thereof.
I actually generated one time. I said I went to ChatGPT and said, give me a top 10 list of roller coasters, and I'll tell you what, it generated a pretty solid list.
It's probably better than a lot of our voters.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's for sure. I think there was more critical thinking being done by the AI than there has been in some of our submissions this year.
Here we go with the critical thinking again.
Critical thinking. Well, shockingly. Anyway.
Well, speaking of critical thinking, so throw out what you've been doing the last couple of years with the Coaster Rumble. No more for now. We're going back to the way it began, going back to the OG Thrilling 32 format here. So again, as we show you these brackets, we're going to show you 4 different groups for the wood bracket and then 4 different groups for the steel bracket. And these are all head-to-head now. It's going one-on-one. So in every matchup, you are simply picking the coaster that you think ranked higher in the final tally of all of the votes in the Ride Warrior Choice Awards from the 2023 season. We're in 2024 now, another record year of voting, as always. So you're just trying to predict which ride and each individual matchup ranked higher on the final list, and ultimately your champion at the very end will be the coaster that you think ranked number 1 in the 2023 Ride Warrior Choice Awards.
So mind you, not the rides that you like the best. It's not. Correct. You're not voting now. Voting.
No, that part's over. You already did that. You already told us which rides that you're wrong about being the best, right? You already did that part.
So you did that part. Now you're picking what you think everyone else thought. So that's man.
That's right. Or as Andy likes to say, Danny Miller and his 5 cronies that went to Europe this year. So the first round is worth 1 point for each correct guess. The second round, 2 points. The third round, 4 points. Then 8 points. And then the champion is worth 16 points total. Across the wood and steel brackets, we'll tally up all the points. Whoever has the most points wins. The tiebreaker. In the past, we've done, if there's a tie, we go by who has the most total guesses correct. We're not going to do that anymore. We're just, if there's a tie in points, we're going to go right to the tiebreaker questions, which of course will be trying to predict the correct ranking of Manta and Raptor, as it has been. Nobody's ever gotten them both correct. I think we might have had 1 or 2 people get one of them correct, but nobody's ever gotten them both correct in the same year. And I stand to think that probably won't be the case.
I stand to think Raptor's going to be ranked number 1 this year. I'm hoping this is the year. We're going to see how that plays out.
It is possible. It is possible.
At this point, anything is possible. That's what's amazing about the Thrilling 32. Anything is possible right now.
Well, that's right. I mean, if Arthur Poor and Raymond Mann can win the Thrilling 32, then so can you.
So can you. It's not that hard.
All right. So shall we jump into the wood brackets here with our first group?
Yeah, let's go see what we got. This is old school. Old school.
Yeah, it is. All right. So let's start with the Son of Beast group, where we're going after defunct rides again. This is one of our favorite ways to name our groups. We've got Mystic Timbers going from Kings Island going up against Phoenix from Knoebels. We've got Balder from Liseberg in Sweden going up against Troy from Toverland in the Netherlands. We've got Texas Stingray from SeaWorld San Antonio going up against Boulder Dash from Lake Compounce. And we've got Renegade from Valley Fair going up against Prowler.
Oh,
Worlds of Fun, a ride that, Andy, you've always liked very much. We both like Prowler. It's always seemed to get a bad rap. I mean, a couple of interesting things here. First with Mystic Timbers, 2022, the previous year's ranking, the highest score and ranking it's ever had since its debut year. It was number 10 last year. And Phoenix is kind of trending downwards a little bit. Three of the previous four times it dropped in rankings, it rose the following year, and it dropped last year. So, is Phoenix going to come back up again?
And so it begins, as I say, and so it begins. These wood, you know what? Because there's such a lack of new wood roller coasters, generally speaking, it is so very hard to predict where these things, because initially you just want to say, let's go back to last year's rankings, which will hopefully by this time be up on the website, thrilling32.com, where you can kind of look at what previous year's rankings are. We'll hopefully have the 2022 stuff up there. But trying to look at this stuff, and Danny, once again, you've chosen some real shit here, because you got the issue with Phoenix and Mystic Timbers. Like I always overrank Phoenix in this tournament, me personally. But then Phoenix is always like my stab in the back. Like whenever I put Phoenix anywhere and pick Phoenix to win, it loses. When I've ever picked Phoenix to lose, it wins. So
and Phoenix in particular, this is where the head-to-head format is really, really challenging now, right? Because this group in the Rumble format might have been pretty easy to pick out the top four, and then the ranking would have been the hard part. But now that you've got this head-to-head style creeping back in. I mean, if you want to look at the numbers here, Phoenix has never been outside the top 10, actually never outside the top 9. It was number 9 in 2019 and then again last year, but it's been as high as number 5 a couple of times. And Mystic Timbers debuted at number 6 in 2017, but its low has been number 12 in 2018, 2019, and in 2021. And then it was number 10 last year. So both of these rides have a very small variance from where they've appeared over the years, and it's very, very realistic that either ride could be ahead of the other, right? Just in this matchup.
Yeah, and then you follow that up with a Renegade and Prowler, where conventional wisdom would say Prowler should be the winner in that matchup. But our brackets, our voters have never really borne out those numbers. That Prowler has always Prowler posted its worst showing ever, correct, last year.
The Prowler's worst showing was in 2019 at number 29. Let's see, I'm bringing up the history here. Prowler last year, because I have the big spreadsheet here. Prowler last year was number 22.
And I said that it was criminally underranked.
Now, what's interesting is it was number 29 in 2019, which was its lowest ever, but it went up to number 24 and then up to number 22. And then I think it was 22 again. So Prowler has actually risen in the rankings and has improved its score every year over the course of the last 3 years. So Prowler is on a little bit of an uptick, but Renegade kind of is as well, too, because
Renegade took a huge shot up, though, I feel.
Over the last 3 years, Renegade has ranked on average number 13 with a high of number 10 in 2021. So Renegade in recent years has been the higher ride, but Prowler is on a little bit of an uptick. And we talk about we've called it the Candemonium effect, where when Candemonium opened, we saw Skyrush have a huge jump where other rides in that park. Do you think that Prowler might see a little bit of the Zambezi Zinger effect, where people went for Zambezi Zinger, but then they moved Prowler up their rankings?
No, I don't think so.
No, you don't see that happening?
I don't think that happened. But what I do think, with speaking of people moving up things on their rankings, I do think you have to take a real look at Balder here, considering the Job Squad did go to Europe and ride Balder this past summer. And I've always heard always great things about Balder. And I'm beginning to wonder if Balder might be the dark horse coming out of this bracket because of the jabronis all attending and going to ride the same ride. I'm very curious to see how much Balder jumps and what kind of rub Balder gets here.
Well, Balder is an interesting one because Balder, for the first time in 2014, was the first time it had enough riders to have a valid ranking, and it was number 5. Following year, it was number 7. Then in 2016, for whatever reason, we lost some Balder riders, and it didn't have a valid ranking. It's been validly ranked every year since 2017, and it was number 12, number 10, number 16, number 21 in 2020, which was its lowest ever, back up to 13 in 2021, and then back down to 21 last year. So Balder has been, much like the ride itself, has been very up and down the last couple of years. But I have to admit, people know that I'm not the biggest fan of El Toro, and there's nothing really wrong with the ride. It's a fine ride, but El Toro just doesn't do it for me anymore. That's
probably the nicest thing I've ever heard you ever say about El Toro.
I rank it in my top 50. What can I say? But in any way, it's fine. There's certainly things that I think it could do better. There's things that I think a lot of other rides do better. To me, I like Balder much better than El Toro. Balder was sort of the ride that I was like, people really talk about this ride, and I'm not sure if I understand the hype. And I really enjoyed the hell out of Balder. And I will tell you, one of the better ERT sessions that I've had, we had enough people to almost completely fill the 2 trains, and it was one of those deals where everybody found a seat and we just stay seated for the whole hour. I rode row 3 of Balder 13 times in a row and did not get out of my chair.
That's an ERT session.
That's an ERT session.
That is an ERT. All this other nonsense that you guys go to these events and ride where they make you get off and walk around the line, those are not ERT sessions.
And
that's just being at the park when it's empty.
And I will say the lovely people at Liseberg let us sign the roller coaster in the morning. We got to go to the inner circle of Balder there. We got to sign our names, and they were so nice. This is something we learned. Balder does not have a minimum verify location on those lap bars. It's early enough that it doesn't have a minimum verify position. So if nobody's in the seat, they just leave the lap bar up, and during ERT, they were just letting us put the lap bar wherever we damn please. And we were just going on the seatbelt. And like I said, 13 rides in a row. And I celebrated the halfway point of the ERT session by getting smacked in the teeth with Alex Baker's vape, which was lovely.
Well,
he was sitting right in front of me, and
I'm surprised you didn't lose a tooth on that ride.
Well, yeah. I was after ride 7. I was like, front row, check your pockets, make sure you didn't lose anything. And then we're walking back to the hotel, and he's like patting. He's like, "Oh, Danny, I think I figured out what hit you. I lost my vape."
That's a very good impression.
So it'll be interesting to see where, like we said, more riders doesn't necessarily mean a better ranking. It could mean a better ranking. It could mean a worse ranking if people weren't fans of it. And it could stay the same if the general voting pool before this big influx of riders has the ranking correct. So, we'll see if it's a top 10, top 5 ride, or if it stays in the 20s. It could be either, but I think Balder is a good ride to be looking at if you're looking for a dark horse in this group.
Well, I think we should move on to the next bracket because I think we're currently trending at an 8-hour show. So
yes, that's right. All right, so let's go to the Pegasus group. Little known fact, Pegasus was the ride that existed on the plot of land where Joris and the Drac now sits at Efteling. So, and that's a ride we see here in this group. So we've got Colossus from Heide Park in Germany going up against the Legend from Holiday World. We've got Hugh Cullen from now Emerald Park in Ireland going up against a ride that is appearing in the Thrilling 32 for the very first time. It's Tonnerre Zeus from Parc Asterix in France. We've got Joris and the Drac from Efteling in the Netherlands going up against the Voyage from Holiday World, the defending champion for many, many years now, and the presumed favorite here. And we've got the Coaster from P&E Playland in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, going up against Gold Striker from California's Great America in Santa Clara, California. So I mean, in this group, it's obviously the Voyage is the favorite here. 6-time defending champion, 7-time overall champion, has increased its overall score each of the last 3 years to new record numbers in the Wood Coaster poll. But beyond that, there's Coaster and Gold Striker is a really tough matchup. And then you've got Q Cullen, which historically has been towards the very bottom edge of the Thrilling 32 against Tonnerre 2 Zeus, which used to be Tonnerre de Zeus before the recent refurbishment, which had never been higher than 35, which is what it was last year. So obviously Tonnerre 2 Zeus has seen a jump. So how do you wage those two coasters against one another here? Q Cullen was actually the bubble coaster at number 32 in both 2020 and 2021. So the question is, has Tonnerre 2 Zeus leapfrogged it over on that side?
I have no idea. I have no idea about any of these coasters.
There's a lot of Europe in this bracket.
There's a lot of Europe in this bracket, so you're not going to hear a lot of exposition out of me. Besides the fact that obviously Voyage should be your winner. If you're not picking Voyage out of this bracket, you haven't been watching very much. But outside of that, you have like Coaster at P&E and Gold Striker. That's we know Gold Striker is a favorite of this tournament for some obscene reason. I don't know why. Haven't figured it out myself. But besides
the last 2 years has been Gold Striker's highest two rankings. Yeah. It was number 4 last year, and it wasn't in the final 4. Mike Flynn will remind me of that, but it was number 5 in 2021, and then up to number 4 in 2022. So Gold Striker has been doing extremely well.
It's gonna be a real sad day when they close it.
Yeah, he got that right.
Maybe they'll move it to, I don't know where they could move it to.
Yeah.
Because even if they moved it to Knott's Berry, it still would be the second best wood coaster in the park. So I don't have a whole lot to say here. I think there's some you got to use some numbers here. You got to take some guesses because there's a lot of rides that you may or may not be familiar with. And it's interesting to see, like you said, that some things have jumped up and moved on, but I think this one you're gonna have to really think about, because in these brackets, these little matches count a lot. They count a lot, yeah. and you can win or lose this tournament sometimes in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, when the difference is 1 or 2 points, or even coming down to a tiebreaker at the end of all of this, it's not the everybody who's in contention is getting both champions right, unless there's a huge surprise like the year Expedition G-Force beat Fury and nobody has one of the champions right. So, those 1 or 2 point differences that make the difference in the standings, you make those up in this first round here with these tough first round matchups. And I'm curious. I mean, obviously Voyage on the right side of this page here, but on the left side of that page here, Colossus, Legend, Q Cullen, Tonnerre de Zeus, those are all rides that are typically towards the bottom of the Thrilling 32, and they're kind of just happy to be in the show.
Yeah,
right?
you're kind of picking. You're picking what's better in that 20 to 30 range, like.
Yeah, which one do you like out of those? Which one are you kind of liking out of those 4?
I don't know. None of them.
The Legend, because you've actually ridden it, maybe?
The Legend, and depending on if you rank it as new Legend or old Legend, I have very different opinions of it. It should actually count as 2 different rides in my mind at some point.
Well, there you go.
Because it's 2 very different rankings.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the better question is that Coaster P&E against Gold Striker. Logic would dictate Gold Striker, but you never know.
Well, I mean, Coaster at P&E. I mean,
didn't Coaster at P&E screw a lot of people last year? I feel like.
It was 2020 when it was ranked at number 4.
Yeah,
was the year that was its high. It was also in 2016 it was number 27, and then in 2017 it jumped up to 11, and then again in 2018 it jumped up to number 6, and ever since then it's been in the top 10. It was 6, 7, 4, 9, and then 7 again last year. So
well, it's ping ponging all around, so you never know.
It's ping-ponging, but only across a few spots. And Gold Striker has, but if you take out 4 and 5 the last 2 years, Gold Striker's been right in that mix too. I mean, 6, 10, 7, 7, 9, 8, 9, and then 5, 4. So, it's these two have flip-flopped with each other many times over the last 4 or 5 years.
Luckily, that's a decision that won't hurt you too hard. That's one that won't hurt you that much.
There's some forgiveness on that side, right?
Yeah.
So that's
sure.
okay. All right. Well, shall we move on to the third group, which is the Scamper group? That's a new name that we haven't seen here before. Right. So we've got Ravine Flyer 2 from Waldemere Park in Erie, Pennsylvania, going up against, what the hell? It's Rutsche Bannon from Tivoli Gardens in Denmark. If you head over to the South Coasters YouTube channel, at the very end of Alex's Bakken and Tivoli Gardens video, he's got a chest mount POV of us riding that ride at night, and it's quite a fun watch. So head over and check that one out if you have a few minutes. Shivering Timbers from Michigan's Adventure going up against Rampage from Alabama Splash Adventure, which we just learned, I think, this week, that is going to be closed all of next season as they look for refurbishment. Not sure what they're looking for. Plenty of wood coaster companies out there. That's another topic for another show.
And RMC is not really that much in business that much anymore, you would think. So, you think they're ready to be answered their phone call.
You think they would pick up the phone. So anyways, on the other side here, we've got Wildfire from Kolmården over in Sweden going up against Hades 360 from Mount Olympus theme park. A ride that just quietly makes the thrilling 32 every year, and then just bows out in the first or second round. And then we've got the Dollywood matchup. We've got Thunderhead against Lightning Rod. So people still ranking Lightning Rod, whether they still count it as wood or ranking it as a defunct wood coaster, still putting Lightning Rod in their rankings enough to have it make the thrilling 32 here. And Lightning Rod has still been doing very, very well.
It's usually number 2, right?
It's been number 2 for the last 5 years still, despite all of the news. So, do you see Lightning Rod? It's the 5-time defending runner-up. And the lowest and the year before that it was number 3, and the year before that, which was its debut year, it was number 1. That's the last time a ride not named Voyage won the wood coaster poll. So do you still believe in Lightning Rod being number 2, or do you think someone somewhere else, either in this group or not, can make a play?
Well, shockingly, you just happen to put Wildfire right there, which I also believe is another ride that might see a significant bump this year based on your previous travels. So I think you're really going to have to, because where's Wildfire been sitting the last few years?
Well, that's the interesting thing here. Wildfire, its highest was actually at number 3 way back in 2018, and that was its peak, right? So if we look at Wildfire, it debuted at number 9 in 2017, and then it jumped from number 9 to number 3 in 2018, and it has dropped every single year since then. In 2019, it dropped to number 6, then it dropped to number 8, then to number 11, and last year in 2022, actually its lowest ranking ever, and actually, if I look, it was actually also its lowest score ever, and it ranked number 13 last year. So the question is, if you're looking at Wildfire to be the Lightning Rod tamer here, do you think that Wildfire...
The big jump.
Well, let's assume for a minute that Lightning Rod is... Let's assume for a minute that Voyage is still number 1. Okay, take that out. In order for Wildfire to beat Lightning Rod has been pretty consistent. Even with the conversion last year, it was still number 2. So you'd almost have to assume that Wildfire has to go all the way up to number 2 or even number 1 to beat Lightning Rod. So do you believe in the Wildfire rider influx enough for it to do that? That's the question you have to ask yourself, right?
And that's the thing, is that's a big jump to make. I guarantee you it's going to have more ridership. We have never revealed the ridership on any rides in this. So that is not something that we talk about. That's not something that how many voters vote for this, how many voters have actually ridden this. Sometimes we might not know either. So if a person submits a bracket that only has 50 rides in it or something, they might have ridden it and they just didn't rank it. We don't know. Sometimes we have an idea, but we may not exactly know what ridership is on any given ride. So that's why we don't really talk about it all that much. But it does greatly impact who votes, how many people vote, how many people have been on it. I do feel that this year Wildfire is going to see a jump. Question is, can it overcome that 13? Because that's what's going to have to do. It's going to have to beat Lightning Rod here, I believe, in that quarterfinal. Is that a quarterfinal? I don't even know what the hell this is. Semifinal, whatever.
Yeah, we're round of 32, they would face off in the round of 16,
yeah.
right?
So that's an interesting one. And there's also a very interesting one with the Rampage versus Shivering Timbers. Shivering Timbers has been making a skyrocket up lately.
It rose 9 spots and almost 5 full percentage points in 2022 following that COASTER-net meetup event there. So Shivering Timbers has a very recent influx of voters who have put it higher.
Yeah, so that's interesting to see what happens there as well. So so there's a lot of big question marks here in this bracket as well. Looking at some of these matchups. So
well, don't sleep on the old Rich Bannon over there.
No.
I'll tell you. I'll tell you what. Wildfire was amazing. Balder was amazing. Rutschke Bannon was the ride that I was most skeptical about out of those 3 rides, and it's the one that took me by the most surprise with how much I enjoyed it. I could ride that thing all day long. That thing was just so much fun. I look, I don't think it's winning this group or anything, but that is a damn good ride for 110 years old. I'll tell you that much.
That's awesome. It's actually funny though. It's weird how they figured it out all the way back then and can't figure it out now.
Yeah, and you know what? In 1914, we had rides that were that good without upstop wheels, and we figured out how to make those trains not run into each other. Figure it out, people.
Figure it out, people, right?
Okay. Shall we move on to the final group here?
Yes.
8 rides, and we've got a number of rides that we have yet to see here. So let's go to the Rolling Thunder group. And this is where we see Outlaw Run from Silver Dollar City going up against the Raven from Holiday World. So all 3 Holiday World rides appearing in the Thrilling 32 again this year. Goliath from Six Flags Great America going up against El Toro from Six Flags Great Adventure. 2 Six Flags rides going at it here. Wodan Timber Coaster from Europa Park in Germany going up against Andy the Coney Island Cyclone has finally back in the Thrilling 32. How about that? And then we've got the Boardwalk Bullet from Kima Boardwalk in Texas going up against Ghost Rider from Knott's Berry Farm.
Well, I can tell you what the best ride in this group is, but it's not going to be the ride that actually makes it to the end.
Okay, so tell us which 2 those are here.
Well, I will say, well, oh man, I would assume Outlaw Run and Ghost Rider would be, but I don't think Ghost Rider that well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fun fact here. Okay, remember when Ghost Rider had that refurbishment done in, what was it, 2015, 16?
Yeah.
It was, right? It was 2016, I think it was, or whatever. Ghost Rider's lowest rank, number 41, and that was in 2014, just before the refurbishment, right? So then, I'll go up to 39, 24, then 28, 16, 17, and then in 2020, it entered the top 10, and it's been number 8 each of the last 2 years. So Ghost Rider is absolutely on a mean streak upwards, no pun intended.
and then you got to make the decision between El Toro and Outlaw Run. Like that's not an easy
once again, that's the matchup we like to give people, and people continue to screw it up, and I anticipate them screwing it up again this year.
It's like we just keep feeding you the same question and you keep answering the same question incorrectly, and
if I answer C enough times, it'll eventually be correct.
Eventually, we'll see. But there's a lot of interesting stuff, and I'll say there's a lot of interesting matchups because there's not a whole lot of movement here. If you look at the bracket as a whole for the entire wood bracket, there's not a whole lot of movement ride wise. We don't see a whole lot of new rides being added. We don't see a whole lot of rides dropping out. There's some corrections here that look like needed to happen, like Cyclone coming back in, that not being in the top 32.
Yep.
Luckily, the Beast is not here. Thank,
Yep. Yep.
thank
So
every.
Yep. So we had so people will notice we have two new rides that were not in last year. Coney Island Cyclone comes up and comes in, and Tonnerre to Zeus for the first time ever is in, and we see the Beast drop out, and we also saw Mind Blower drop out.
Well,
It's only number. I mean, Mind Blower was number 30 last year, and the Beast was number 32. So it's not a real shock that those are two
yeah.
of the ones that fall out
No
here.
one's mind was blown at the deletion of Mind Blower. It's shocking that ride was even in it for this long, to be
Yeah.
completely honest with you. But over on the whole, there's a lot of good questions here still. There's a lot of good questions, and you have to decide if there's some jockeying going on from year to year. We see big jumps. We know that you have ridden a number, and a bunch of voters that we traditionally vote in this poll have ridden a whole bunch of new coasters that include many of the wood coasters on this list. So it could greatly impact those rankings. So it's going to be really interesting to see what rides move on, because I tend to think there's going to be some big jumps with some of these rides.
Well,
And that affects everything then.
yeah, and you're not just. I mean, we talked about Wildfire at some length. We talked about Balder at some length. We mentioned Richie Bonin, but like, just because it's not necessarily contending for the win doesn't mean it doesn't have a big impact on these decisions. Even a ride like Richie Bonin, which isn't traditionally a top 10 ride or isn't thought of as a top 10 ride, a lot of riders and a lot of people enjoying that, even if it was in the 20s or whatever. I think it was around 20, that could bump it up to 15, and I mean, or something like that. And even in a matchup like where it's up against Ravine Flyer, that's about where Ravine Flyer has been in past years. That might be a matchup that Ravine Flyer wins last year. It might not be a matchup that it wins this year, right? So, and when you're thinking about, we talked about Wildfire and Balder, those in particular are rides that have been in the top 10 before, and maybe you have to look at those rides, to compete for top 10, even top 5 spots. I don't know.
So I guess my final question is, before we move on to the coasters, is did Taylor Swift ride any of these rides to significantly move the voting pool one way or the other?
She did not vote. Let's put it that way, or at least not.
Well, if she was photographed on one of the rides, you might get some Swifties in here voting in, because that's,
Well,
we got a
might.
Super Bowl coming up.
I would
It's all
not
about
put it
her.
past our voters. I would not put it past
No.
our voters.
Yeah.
Quick breakdown here, and then we'll go into the steel rides.
Brad seems like a Swiftie.
He probably is. 22 of the 32 wood coasters are from the United States. We have 3 from Indiana, all from Holiday World, California, Missouri, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and Texas with 2 each. And then Alabama, Connecticut, Illinois, Michigan, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, and Wisconsin with 1 each. We have 2 each from Germany, the Netherlands, and Sweden, and 1 each from Canada, Denmark, France, and Ireland. So overall, pretty diverse group of wood coasters, considering there's very few outside of the U.S. A very nice distribution.
Very nice grouping there. So I think it's time to move on, though.
Yes. All right, so let's get into the steel coasters. Finally, Andy's been waiting 45 minutes for this.
Oh, long minutes too.
And we're gonna start off. Andy, take a look at the Drachenfire group. We've got Iron Gwazi from Busch Gardens, Tampa, going Twisted Timbers from King's Dominion. We've got Helix from Liseberg in Sweden going up against Airy Force One from Fun Spot America, Atlanta. We've got Fly from Phantasialand in Germany going up against Untamed from Walibi Holland in the Netherlands. And we've got the Battle of Virginia. We've got Pantheon from Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, going up against Intimidator 305 from King's Dominion. Andy, what do you think of this group?
Oh, I'll tell you what, I've been on finally got on Iron Gwazi. And I there's not a
you
clear
were none
leader.
too pleased.
It was okay. It was fine. I'm not like super in love with it like some people were. I think it hit me the same way that Joker over at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom hit me, and a lot of people are gonna be like, "What the hell are you talking about?" And it hit me in the way that I didn't feel like anything was really unique on it, where I was like, oh
Yeah.
wow, like this feels like something I haven't ridden before. And that was my big criticism of Iron Gwazi was there wasn't anything on it where I'm like, oh wow, it just felt like a lot of the same RMC maneuvers that we see on a lot of the rides. Obviously the height's there, the speed's there. It's a great ride, but the uniqueness factor is what didn't hit very hard on me. And I'm like, oh, okay, whatever.
Uh,
Um,
Iron Gwazi has some great elements, and
yeah,
I think there's if you put like individual elements in a vacuum, and you were to compare like one element to the most similar element on even a ride like Steel Vengeance, I think you can pick out certain elements where it's like, yeah, Iron Gwazi's rendition of that element is like slightly better than like the death roll underneath the lift hill.
yeah.
I think you could argue that Iron Gwazi's downward spiral roll is a little bit better than Steel Vengeance's upward spiral roll, where it does that element in reverse. But when you put the whole thing together, Steel Vengeance is still the superior ride, right? And
Yeah.
for me personally, I even started feeling that way as I rode Wildcat's Revenge, even though it's much smaller. It's like we always talked about how Untamed is Steel Vengeance, but half the size. Wildcat's Revenge to me felt like it was Iron Gwazi, but 2/3 of the size, but it had a better ending and it had a
Mhm.
better Weeble Wobble. And that's the thing. It did all the great things that Iron Gwazi did, but it felt a bit more refined, and that's why I really fell in love with Wildcat's Revenge. And even riding a ride like Zadra, finally, you start to find flaws in rides like Iron Gwazi when you ride some of those other rides.
Well, and you get down to it sometimes and you start thinking about, okay, so what separates the B&M inverts? What separates the B&M, hyper coasters? And you start getting down to, this element versus that element. And to me, the RMCs are even more spaced out because you have Steel Vengeance that's clearly at the top. Of
Yeah.
the pack. And you can say whatever you want about any of these other rides. And you can yell it from any mountaintop you want. They're not better than Steel Vengeance, and nobody will ever convince me that they are. And then
Not as a pure roller coaster, no way.
as a complete roller coaster, as a whole experience, and then you start mixing and matching these different elements. That once you've been on all these different RMCs, and I've been on a whole lot of them since the very beginning. There's not a whole lot of RMCs out there that I have not been on. And you start feeling the same, and that's where Steel Vengeance was like so amazingly better than I think Iron Gwazi was, because Steel Vengeance did all this crazy stuff that you're like, wow, that's completely new. I've never done any of that on any RMC anywhere. And I've been on a whole lot of RMCs up to this point, but Iron Gwazi didn't feel like that to me. It just felt like a remix of Steel Vengeance and other RMCs. And to
Yeah.
me, yeah, it makes a really good ride, but I'm looking for unique at some point too. Like,
Well,
I'm not just looking for, oh, I want you to do it slightly better. It's almost like, oh, Dragster versus King Ka. Well, because it went up a few more feet, does that make it better than Dragster?
right.
Like that's where I get into it. It's like, okay, so you
Well,
made each element slightly better, but you didn't do anything really unique on it either.
and
So
we've been there with the B&M inverts, but we've really been there with the B&M hypers for,
yeah,
2 decades now, where people like say, oh well, all the hypers are the same, all the B&M hypers are the same. And to some extent, to a lesser degree, because the RMCs do have a little bit more variety because they put inversions in, and we're talking about not just straight hills. But we're we've kind of been at that point the last couple of years with the RMCs, right? Where you can only do a zero G stall so many ways, and it gets bigger and it gets slightly
mhm,
flatter and slightly closer to the ground. But the zero G stall is the same element executed slightly differently. Even this step up underflip. I mean, Joker has one of those. It's Wildcat's Revenge has the biggest one, but Zadra has one of them at the end of the ride too. Twisted Cyclone has one right after the first drop. Untamed has one in the middle of the ride. So, you can criticize the B&M hypers, you can criticize the B&M inverts, you can do all you want with that, but we're almost at that point with the RMCs now. There's so many of them, and there's only so many ways you can twist a pair of steel rails
yeah,
and have it be interesting, right? And it's down to the point where when you're comparing these different RMC rides, 5 years ago, it was, well, Steel Vengeance is bigger and longer and faster than all the other ones. But you've got rides like Zadra, and you've got rides like Iron Gwazi now, and you've got rides like Wildcat's Revenge that aren't quite as big, but still have the intensity and the speed aspect, right? So when you're talking about these rides, just like the B&M Hypers, just like the B&M Inverts, it's going to start to come down to nuance. And that's where we're at with these. And that's why, even though Steel Vengeance, Untamed, Zadra, Wildcat's Revenge, Iron Gwazi, Lightning Rod, even though these rides aren't really that far apart, in most cases, you've got to come down to the details when you're comparing them. And that's what's interesting here. I mean, Iron Gwazi last year, 52% of the bracket submissions predicted Iron Gwazi to win last year, and it ended up at number 5, which I think was a fair ranking last year. I mean, number 5 is probably it's a little bit
Probably
higher
right
than
around where I put it, to be complete. I think I put it a little bit lower than that, but
and I have it a little lower this year, but I also rode 100 new coasters this year.
Yeah.
So, but last year, that's about where I had it too. So Iron Gwazi is interesting here. You've got Untamed.
Now you also have to throw in Air Force One, which you just so happen to put inside the same bracket.
You just like how I snuck that in there, right?
Yeah.
So you've got 4 RMCs in this group, which is a lot.
That's a lot of RMCs, and
they're some of what historically have been the better ones. I mean, Untamed, let's look at Untamed. Now it's in the other side of this group here, but Untamed, the lowest it ever was number 5, and that was 2021, but it was number 2 in 2019. It was number 2 again last year in 2022, and it had its second highest ever score last year in 2022, only behind its first year in 2019. So Untamed dipped just a little bit after that debut year and has come back up now. Now, some have argued whether or not Untamed belongs at that high of a spot, but the fact of the matter is that's where it's been. And it outranked Iron Gwazi last year. And we know new rides tend to do very well in this poll, and Iron Gwazi still didn't beat out Untamed. So if Iron Gwazi is going to make it far enough to go up against Untamed, I mean, do you think that Iron Gwazi gets a little bit of a spurt this year? And where does Air Force One come into this whole thing? Because people have said some very nice things about that ride, and I think that's a fine ride. I like Wildcat better, but I think Air Force One is a great contender here in this group.
Well, it's interesting because I've driven past Air Force One 4 times now, and I still haven't, maybe more than 4, 6 times, I think, and I still haven't ridden it. And it's just one of those rides that Atlanta's such a bitch to get through. And when I'm driving through Atlanta, the last thing I want to do is stop and ride a roller coaster for a few hours, because it's so overwhelmingly stressful to drive through that city. I don't even understand why it's that bad, to be completely honest. But like you said, a lot of people have said that Air Force One has been. Some people are saying it's the best RMC. I don't think that's true at all. I've watched POVs. I have critical thinking. I know that it's probably not the best.
Air Force One is great, but what makes it great is it's at such a little place. I mean, it's. But at the end of again, talking about nuance, it's got a great little high-speed barrel roll, and people talk about those high-speed barrel rolls being distinctive factors. Well, Velocicoaster does that way better. And if Maverick would have that roll, it would have done it way better. And you know what? Rides like Taiga, they've got high-speed barrel roll type inversions too. And Max Force has a really good high-speed barrel roll. So, you can't make that be the reason. And again, nuance.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it is just an out and back. And while those hills have tremendous airtime, I like the variety that some of these other rides have a little bit more.
So you have to decide that. And you have to decide Helix, which has always been one of those rides that I feel like everyone has thought should be a lot higher in this poll. And I think this might be the year, because once again, the Job Squad crew went on Helix, and there's a lot of extra riders on Helix this year. And I think this
Another
might be
great
the year.
ERT session we had, by the way, at night.
Yeah, I think this might be the year that Helix finally gets what it's due, because
Well, and
I've always thought
Helix,
Helix is a really good ride. Like looking at
yes.
PFDs.
Helix is a tremendous ride, and it was number 5 in 2017 and 2019. When it had fewer riders, it was up there high. And like we've seen with rides like Nemesis and Blue Fire, and even a ride like Banshee, as more riders, it sort of settles in and it drops down. From in 2019, it was number 5, and then it dropped to number 37 in 2020. It dropped 32 spots,
Yeah.
which was the largest single year drop by any top 5 ride in the history of the Thrilling 32. But it's back in the top 20 now, at least as of last year. If I'm trying to quick find it here where Helix was last year. Last year, Helix. Remember, it was 37 in 2020.
Mhm.
It jumped back up to 18 in 2021, and last year was back up to number 14. So Helix has already started to come back up. So the
Helix
question
is one of those that I feel is really dependent upon ridership. And so now that we're going to have a solid ridership crew with that ride, where I feel that the people who have ridden are going to vote in this poll every single year, I feel that wherever Helix goes this year is pretty much where it's going to settle in at. The question is where does that settle in at?
Yeah, I mean, it was 14 last year. Could it go back up to the top 5 where it's been in the past? Could it drop to like the 20s? Could it stay right in that top 10, top 15?
There's a bunch of coasters on here. So this, more so than the wood coaster list, I think, there are a number of and we're going to reveal some future brackets here. But what I think you're going to see is there's a number of rides that, like a Helix, and some new entries, and maybe some entries that were new last year, where I think we're going to see drastic shifts in the top 10, in 10 to 20, and really the whole thing, to be completely honest. I think we're going to see a whole lot of stuff going on here. And finally, well, we'll get to that later. I don't want to spoil that right now. But looking at this bracket right here, you got some big choices. Because you got to figure out Iron Gwazi again. You got to figure out Helix. You got to figure out where Untamed goes. And then you got to figure out, kind of know where Pantheon falls. But then Pantheon against Intimidator, that's...
Talk about the Battle of Virginia. I mean...
Jesus, this one's worse than Appomattox Courthouse or something. Like, what the hell?
That one is going to be trickier than you think. Your gut says, okay, I-305 former champion, fine. Pantheon ranked higher than I-305 last year. So you've got to think about that one a little bit.
Well, that's the thing. Intimidator 305 has been on. It's fallen faster than its first drop at this point. Like
it dropped 16 spots.
Yeah,
number 10.
Former champion too, by the way. Former champion
has not been in the top 5 since 2017.
And I felt like it had a death grip on those top spots for so long. And then when it fell, it just plummeted.
It hasn't been in the top 5 since 2017. It's almost like right when Steel Vengeance got built, everything changed in that top 5.
Right when people realized, hey, wait a minute, that's a roller coaster.
Now that's a ride.
Right.
We spent quite a bit of time on that group here for good reason, but we do have 3 more groups to get through.
We do. We don't have all night here.
So let's go to the Turbulence group, and just like the Battle of Virginia, we're going to give you the Battle of Hershey, Pennsylvania here. Skyrush goes up against Wildcats Revenge. The ride that's been on the block for a dozen years is taking on the new kid in the block across the park. So you know what, Hershey Park fans, those of you who love Skyrush, those of you who love Wildcats Revenge, you got to make the choice right away. Which team are you on? Not in opinions. Which one do you think everybody likes better?
Yeah.
And the reward for winning that battle is the winner of Zadra from Energylandia in Poland and Lightning Rod from Dollywood, the steel version that's been in existence for 2 years now. Zadra was outranked by Lightning Rod last year, and Zadra is one that some people got to ride. It wasn't on the group part of the trip, but many people got to go ride it, yours truly included. So Zadra did not have the big jump last year we expected. Will it have it this year? We'll talk about that in a minute. former champion Jurassic World Velocicoaster going up against the Flying Dinosaur from Universal Studios Japan. So we've got the Islands of Adventure Jurassic World ride going up against the Universal Japan Jurassic Park ride. Got to battle the dinosaurs for Andy. And we've got Nemesis from Alton Towers going up against Phantom's Revenge from Kennywood in West Mifflin, Pennsylvania. So I don't know where the hell you'd like to start, but I'll let you steer the ship on this group.
Well, I'm going to start with, we can finally get a valid ranking for Velocicoaster because I finally got on it, finally rode the former champ. This past Christmas, got on it. It's a great ride.
It's a fine ride.
It's not better than Steel Vengeance. So,
but look, I'll say this. Again, pure roller coaster, no argument, Steel Vengeance. But if you're looking for the entire package, you like a themed ride with a story and just immersive story start to finish, it doesn't get too much better than Velocicoaster.
No, it's got a great story. My favorite part of the entire ride is not even the ride itself. It's walking past the area where you see the coaster launch and then the Raptors like chase it.
They chase after it. Yeah.
They chase after it.
It's so cool.
That's not my favorite part. My favorite part is the ceiling in that room.
Yes.
It's modeled after Jurassic Park. The original Jurassic Park had the ceiling with the little holes in it, and it casts this light on your face, kind of reminiscent of how the computers casted light on your face in that scene with where they're running through the above the drop ceiling and the Raptors are chasing them and sticking their heads through. And that was my favorite part of the ride. Like, I'm like sitting around, I'm like, why did they use this ceiling? And then it dawned on me, I'm like, oh my God, they took this right out of Jurassic Park 1. This is amazing.
And it's one of the reasons that in my 12 visits that year that I had a season pass a couple years ago, I didn't care if that line was an hour long. We got right back in the line because I love going through that queue. And the realism of the raptor that's in like the harness there.
Yes.
And like if you put your hand in front of their nose, you can actually feel them breathing on you.
Yeah.
And, it's just an amazing.
The queue line is so well done. I didn't understand some aspects of it, which I think they just threw together, like especially when you move from the Raptor squad room into like that first like cement room. I didn't understand what was going on there and what they were trying to do. But then you move into the other room with the launch, and then you get up to the story section with Owen and Claire giving you the whole story behind the ride. I'm like, this is fantastic. And then you get on the ride and it continues the story. And there's some really great moments on that ride. I'm not gonna lie. There's the Heartline roll on that coaster. I was a little skeptical because I'm standing there. We stayed in a very long line. We had to go into the extended queue. So I was right there up against the Mosasaurus roll. Watched the first big drop off of the top hat. So I was like looking at him like, this thing it looks slow. It looks slow, but Intamins tend to do that sometimes. Intamins tend to look slow. And I will say that there's some parts on it that I wish were a little faster, a little bit more whippy. But that Mosasaurus roll, shit.
Could you imagine if Maverick actually had that?
Oh my God. Like I still personally think Maverick might be better than Velocicoaster. I only rode Velocicoaster once. The line was like an hour and a half, 2 hours long. Yeah. So I only rode it once, but if Maverick had that Heartline, because there's some of the things I don't like about Velocicoasters. I feel that Intamin especially, and I felt this way with Pantheon, and then it continued with Velocicoaster, is they're doing rides and they're making rides that just have maneuvers, is what I call them. And they turn to the left and they turn to the right. But they don't whip you either way. Because like when Maverick does it, like it whips you violently. And I think
there's a purpose to every move.
Exactly. And I feel like Velocicoaster was almost too smooth, kind of like how Volcano the Blast Coaster was almost perfectly engineered for their rolls. I feel like they're doing that with their maneuvers, and they're almost too smooth. And I want more whippiness. I want more eject. I wish it had more ejector air, more airtime on it in general. I think that's the biggest difference between Maverick and Velocicoaster for me, is the kind of lack of airtime on Velocicoaster. Like there's some moments where you on the drops where you get a little, but there's no hill. that you get that pop. Maybe on the top hat a little bit, depending on where you're sitting. But I felt like I needed more of that.
Yeah, if you're in the very back on Velocicoaster, out of the first inversion, you get some nice whip. You get a little bit of
Yeah,
float into the dive loop. Then there's some positive G's. There's that crossover hill with the head chopper, the
yeah.
rock. And then there's not really air time before you hit that second launch between after that rock there. But for me, the enjoyment comes out of being able to see the Raptors off to the right.
Yeah, it's like
Right,
you're in the paddock and stuff, and you're right
yeah,
in
so
there.
that's cool. And then it's sort of all hell breaks loose over the top of the top hat. And there is some airtime in the second half, and there's some intense positive G's too, which I didn't necessarily expect out of that ride the first time. And then you get the roll over the water,
Oh,
which
the roll. I
and,
like
and,
the
and if you
roll.
can, if you're aware enough when you come out of that overbank turn where you're getting positive G's and where you go over that little airtime pop, if you get that little airtime speed hill pop just right to the
Hmm.
point where your butt lands in the seat back a little bit and you have just a little bit of
Yeah,
room, it feels like you're coming out of that thing, man.
yeah.
It feels like you can touch the water. So
That I tell you what, that roll, if you take up any single element on any coaster, the best element, that roll is up there. There's some other really good elements, but that roll is so good, so well done. And I
yeah.
wasn't sure because I watched it a lot. I wasn't sure. I'm like, it
Yeah.
looks a little slow, but then I said it looks a little faster than Outlaw Run's roll, and that the barrel roll on Outlaw, you just hang and stuff. And this one you go through a little bit faster, but it's so well done. It's so well done. Anyway, I do think Velocicoaster takes this bracket here. I'm not there's a lot of competition though. I'm not gonna lie. That Skyrush Wildcats Revenge matchup is one that I haven't been on Wildcats Revenge, but I really love Skyrush. I think people hate on Skyrush way too
Yeah.
much. And I think the hate on Skyrush has increased. Uh and people still bitch about the restraints. Gentlemen, it's 2024. Let's get over it.
Well, and here's the thing, like to me, Wildcats Revenge is clearly the winner here, but I've seen a surprising number of people say that they still like Skyrush
Yeah.
better. And that would make me question that. If I'm doing the bracket here, right? Like that makes me question whether or not Skyrush is actually going to be the higher ranked ride here and
I'm
in
gonna
that
be honest with
matchup.
you. I don't know which one I'm gonna like better because I'm a little RMC'd out at this point. Where I don't know if I write RMCs, if I'm just gonna be like, oh, it's just more of the same. Or I'm gonna be like, oh wow, that's really freaking spectacular. Where
Well,
it can go either way for me.
Well, and here's the thing with Skyrush. It's been in 2013, it was at its low at number 35. And in 2020, it peaked at number 5. It's been in the top 10 four times in 2015, 2017, 2020, and 2021. It's been 7, 8, 5, and 8 in each of those years. But it's also been 15, 20, 14, 16, 3 times, including last year. So Skyrush is, you talked about ping ponging earlier.
Yeah.
Skyrush is the real ping pong ball because it'll
Yes.
be top 5 and then it'll be out of the top 15 and then it'll be top 8 and then it'll be number 20.
And in
Like,
fairness, like you said, and we've always said this, is new coasters tend to do a little bit better in their first year in this poll. Will Wildcats Revenge, did enough people write it? Did enough people get out to Hershey? Because Hershey might be a place that everyone doesn't just automatically go to. I don't know if enough people got out to write it. If we're gonna see
well,
that.
the thing is, they did open it. They did open it just after Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah.
They opened it the weekend of Hollywood Nights, for pass holders. But then remember, it got shut down for a couple of times. For a week
Mm-hmm.
or two here to do some structural work. I think was the rumors. So even though that ride opened at the beginning of June, and it was open, during Christmas Candy Lane and obviously during dark nights. But there are a couple of times where it was closed during the year, during the summer. And I know a couple of people who had trips planned and were there during that and did not get to ride it. So, just because it opened in June doesn't mean a ton of people rode it. So, but
And then on top of that, you have Zadra here too.
Well, and that's the thing here. Zadra, another ride that we got to ride. Alex had already ridden it a couple of times and got to re-ride it, but several other people, not everybody, but a lot of other people did add that on either before or after. Zadra certainly, I think, last year was number 24, which I think is far too low. The year before it was even number 16, and I think that's even far too low. Now, the interesting to note here is even though it fell 8 spots between 21 and 22 last year, it only saw a 0.41% decrease because the entire field scores tended to skew upwards. So even though it fell 8 spots last year, it didn't really have its score lowered that much. So I think that's an important note here, that it falling 8 spots, I think, was more of a result of other rides doing better as opposed to that ride being pushed down rankings. So, it'll be interesting because Lightning Rod in its first year as a steel coaster was number 12 last year, and Zadra was 24. So even if you think Zadra is going to see a big leap, I think you still have to question whether or not it's actually going to be higher than Lightning Rod.
That's funny because I have no idea. Like I don't get the Lightning Rod steel coaster stuff, so I haven't really been on it as a steel coaster. I don't think it's much different, but whatever.
It's really not because it's still 40% wood.
Right, so it's still right up there. So there's a lot of big question marks in this bracket.
And I mean, again, talking about trying to maximize your points, that Nemesis Phantom's Revenge matchup, I don't think anyone's picking either of those rides to win the group. But that is a matchup that will probably matter when it comes down to who wins this tournament. That's a matchup that will. I would wager that whoever wins the tournament is going to have that winner picked right in the first round because that's an extra point that they're going to need.
Yeah, like this. There's a lot of points that you need to pick up, especially in this. Like we said before, there's a lot of things you need to pick up in this first round, and if you don't, it's going to be hard to make them up later on. I think that I would tend to say that I think this is the group that might give people the biggest challenge in terms of early decisions. I think 3 of these first round decisions are very, very difficult. And I think even a couple of the resulting matchups that you could have here are very difficult. And, like we said, Velocicoaster dropped a little bit last year and was beaten out by Untamed. And a lot of people have compared Wildcat. I don't think it's out of the question that Wildcat wins this group. I'll tell you that right now. I think that's a distinct... No, looking at the field, I think Wildcat's a possibility. I don't know Velocicoaster, how that's going to fare moving forward here.
Zadra, is this the year that Zadra makes the big leap and it's a top 5 ride? Could Zadra win the group?
Yeah, I do feel, though, that next year's bracket's going to be a lot easier after this year.
It might be. I think you might be right. But you may not be either.
Who knows?
Shall we move on to our third group of steel coasters here? We've got the Wicked Twister group. And check this one out, Andy. This is your favorite group because it's a bunch of shit from Europe.
Oh, man. With one thrown in.
Well, 2 thrown in. We've got Expedition G-Force from Holiday Park in Germany going up against Conda, the surprise top 4 ride from Walibi, Belgium last year. We've got Iron Rattler from Six Flags Fiesta, Texas, going up against the Ride to Happiness from Plopsaland de Pan in Belgium. We've got Maverick from Cedar Point going up against Terran from Fantasyland. The long-time debate will finally be settled this year in the Thrilling 32. And check this one out, Andy. A first-time appearance in the Thrilling 32 for Lek Coaster from Legendia in Poland.
Really? It's the first time?
First time. It's been in the top 50 before, but it's never cracked the Thrilling 32. Let me double check my notes there, but I'm pretty sure
you could very well be right. But...
I'm pretty sure I did my notes correctly here. Actually, let's see. I have to search for the word elect in order to figure this one out. Yes, it's had a valid ranking twice before, in 2019 and 2021. It was ranked 38 both times, so it's been in the top 50 twice. First time in the thrilling 32 for Lek Coaster, and it draws Taiga from Linnanmäki in Finland in the first round here. So based off of last year rankings, that's a tough first round matchup to draw. But lots of European rides here. So I suspect that you'll have none too much to say about this group.
No,
but you might
I do say that there's a lot.
Of the decisions here.
There's a lot to be worried about in this division. No, Ride to Happiness seems to be the new flavor of the month from Europe.
It does, doesn't it?
Does, right? Everyone's talking about Ride to Happiness this, Ride to Happiness this. Everyone's raving about that one.
And I'll tell you what, I wasn't a firm Ride to Happiness believer, but a lot of people whose opinions closely mirror mine and some other people's have said it's very legit. They've said it's very intense and very out of control. So, they say it's like it's kind of like you put like a time traveler on something a little bit closer to Maverick. And if that's actually what it is, like I can believe that it might be
Time Traveler is a really good ride. Like there's no
Time Traveler is great.
But Time Traveler has a lot of flaws in it too. Its length, its speed, it's whatever. So yeah, like you said, if you put those trains on something that's a little zippier, I could definitely see that. And then in that same little division, you got Conda, you got G-Force, you got Rattler, who seems to be on the downward trend, and Conda on the upward trend, and maybe G-Force. It's hard to get a read on G-Force too.
The G-Force Conda one is interesting because G-Force's lowest ranking ever was back in 2014 at number 11, but then it was the champion in 2016, that surprise championship year, featuring Arthur Poor. And last year it was number 8, which is the lowest ranking that it's had since 2014. It's also the first time outside the top 5 since 2014. So G-Force has dropped a little bit, and Conda was number 4 last year. It's the only year it's had a valid ranking. So, you have to put a little bit of an asterisk by the number 4 on Conda there, and if that's going to hold from year to year, because, like we saw with G-Force, G-Force was high and then it sort of dropped down a little bit. We've seen that happen before. So when you're looking at that rank, I think you got to feel pretty confident that G-Force is still going to be top 10 ride. Might be top 8. You might even be able to convince yourself it's still top 5 or 6, right? I think you've got to ask yourself, are you convinced that Conda can stay in the top 4 or 5? Because if you think Conda's going to settle back down the list a little bit, maybe you're looking at G-Force to win that one. But if you think the number 4 ranking from Conda is legit, and personally, if I look at those 2 rides side by side, I just on visuals, to me, critical thinking says Conda's the better ride.
Critical thinking would tell me that Conda's a better ride too. But that's one of those that people love G-Force and people don't want to give up on G-Force, and you don't know where they're ultimately going to put that. And then and then we haven't really talked about, oh man, Maverick and Tyrone, Terran or whatever. I personally think that's not even a choice, like based on everything I've seen. Like there's no question in my mind.
Yeah, there's some Terran loyalists out there, and people make fun of me all the time for being a Europe guy, right? And I love so many rides in Europe. Some of them on this page. And I love Terran. I really do. Terran is an exceptional ride. Maverick is the better ride, in my opinion. Maverick is the more complete ride. It's the more intense ride. To me, Maverick is the better roller coaster here. There is a line somewhere where theming does not make up for what the roller coaster is. And I've said this before. If you take Terran and put it just in an empty field, kind of like Maverick is, with some light theming. Maverick is the better roller coaster, and there becomes a point where the theme cannot make up for it. And Velocicoaster, to me, there's a difference between Velocicoaster and that roller coaster versus Terran and that roller coaster, and what the themes provide. The themes can only provide so much to those individual rides. To me, Maverick is the better ride than Terran, even with the whole package considered. And I think that's been reflected in recent years voting. Ever since those soft restraints went on Maverick has been very, very good. It's been as high as number 4 back in 2016, but it's been in the top 10 every year since 2016. We're looking on 7 straight years now, potentially, where Maverick has been, 16, so yeah, I guess that's 7 years, right? Where Maverick's been in the top 10. Terran, on the other side of that, was number 25 last year. That's the lowest. It's the lowest it's ever been. It's the lowest it's ever been since it's been in the Thrilling 32. It was number 38 in 2016, way back when, before it had a lot of ridership. It's been as high as number 3 the following year in 2017. But 25 is the lowest it's been since it's been in the Thrilling 32 regularly. So, is Terran settling down like we've seen rides like Blue Fire in the past?
I do feel like Terran has popped really high at one point, and then I think it's beginning to settle in. And I, based on POVs, I don't disagree with what's happening there at all.
And Terran's still a fantastic ride. I mean, especially still to be in here, but to me, it's not quite Maverick. And
then we get to the elephant in the room, and that's Taiga. And Taiga placed exceptionally well last year.
Number 9 last year.
Yeah, out of nowhere. And now a whole bunch more people have just gone to ride Taiga. And it seems that the general consensus is, which I don't understand, is that it's a really fine roller coaster. I watched some POVs and it looks slow to me, but
but you said yours, and
Incidents look slow, but this
I'll agree with you.
Exceptionally slow.
I'll be honest with you, Andy. I of all the rides on our trip, Taiga was the one that I was most worried about how excited I was for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say that again. Taiga, of close to 100 roller coasters we rode, Taiga was the ride I was most worried for how excited I was to ride it. Not Zadra, not Wildfire, not Balder. Taiga is the ride that I was worried about how excited I was. And if you follow me on social media, you know how much I fell in love with Taiga that day. And it's the first Finnish ride to ever be in the Thrilling 32 as well. Here, number 9 last year. So I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's going to make it past the first round, and then it's going to be. I think if it goes up against Maverick, it's going to be a crapshoot there. Like, depending on, like, both rides are right in that same zone. And we're going to find out which one you guys think is the better one. Maybe not which one is the better one, but which one you guys think is the better one.
Yeah, well.
So, yeah. So good luck with this bracket, this bracket too. This is, like you said, diabolical is the proper word for this at this point. So we got one left here. So let's see.
Yes, good luck on that group. 2 rides ranked right next to each other last year there, if you think they're going to face each other. So let's move on to our last group here, the Moonsault Scramble group. For good reason here, Andy. We've got X2 from Six Flags Magic Mountain going up against Asia Nika from Holland. Finally, the battle of the big 4D coasters. We get that head-to-head here. Then we get Schwerdes-Kernen from Hansa Park in Germany going up against Steel Vengeance, the defending champion from Cedar Point, the defending champion and 4-time overall champion in 2018, 19, 20, and 22. Only 1 loss head-to-head ever, and that was in the 2021 championship to Velocicoaster. So Steel Vengeance here in our last group. Then we have Shambhala from Portaventura Park in Spain going up against Fury 325 from Carowinds. And finally, Andy, look at this, Hyperion from Energylandia in Poland coming back to the Thrilling 32 after an absence of a couple years, and it is going head-to-head with Millennium Force from Cedar Point in Ohio. That was quite the facial reaction you had to that one right there.
So
What
Millennium Force
final group here?
still kicking here? Like,
yeah,
like Millennium Force still in the top 32. I thought for sure Millennium Force was eventually gonna fall out of this completely based on
20. It's been 23 each of the last 2 years. So that's the lowest it's ever been the last 2 years, but it's still still a healthy ranking to get in the Thrilling 32. Not quite on the verge of falling out just yet. But
still in there pretty solidly. So yeah, this round I feel like it's deceptively easy, which makes me wonder what's going on here. Because conventional logic would say the first matchup should be clear, the second matchup should be clear, the third matchup should be clear, and the fourth matchup should be clear. So I'm not quite sure what's going on here, because it's kind of like, when you're taking that multiple choice test and you start circling A and then A and then A, and by that fourth A, you're wondering, wait a minute, what's going on here?
like, which of the previous three did I screw up? Because I know the fourth one's actually A.
Right, all of a sudden, you're kind of like, wait a minute, there's something amiss here. There's some deviousness afoot. But even if you get out of the first round, like Steel Vengeance looks like it's got a nice little walk to the finals, which I don't think anyone should really question. Well, maybe at least into the final four, it's got a nice little walk into the final four. But then you got to start making decisions at the other end with Hyperion and Fury and Shambhala.
Hyperion's interesting here. It was number 27 and inside the Thrilling 32 2 years ago, and then it dropped out last year. It dropped to number 41. Which was a similar drop to what Zadra saw that year. So, let's keep that in mind. But as you were saying,
but a lot of people did tend to ride Hyperion this year. So all of a sudden,
surprised me as well. I will say that Hyperion's a very good ride.
So now we have that debate opened up. Where I think if it was last year, I think this would be a lot easier decision. But once you're looking at Hyperion and Millennium Force, Millennium Force, we just said is that solid middle of the road coaster. Is Hyperion going to settle in there? Is going to make a huge jump? This is the year, ladies and gentlemen, that if you're going to see massive jumps, I think this is the year that you have a real good chance of seeing something move, 10, 15, maybe 20 spots. I don't know. It seems crazy, but I'm actually more excited to see that than I am to see, who wins individual matchups. I want to see which of these coasters are actually legit and should be talked about, and which ones have just been Europeans overranking their own rides, which I think a lot of this has been. People like Alex overranking European coasters.
Well, yeah, right. I mean, Hyperion is certainly the maybe the most interesting one here, just because it wasn't in the Thrilling 32 last year, and it's kind of a blank slate for that ride. Interesting note here with Fury. Last year was the first time Fury was ever not in the top three. It was number 6 last year. So Fury did drop just a little bit last year. Shambhala has been up and down. It's been as high as number 9 a few years ago, but it's also been as low as number 38 the year just prior to that. So, Shambhala has kind of been up and down. Steel Vengeance, the track record's, obvious there, and well known. Schvertis Kernan has done well the last couple of years. It was number 13 last year. It was very high last year. The year prior to that, it was barely in the top 50, so maybe some ridership issues going on there. It was in the Thrilling 32 way back in 2017, and then it wasn't in again until 2022. So Kernan is one of those weird ones. Asian Ica is interesting here. It was number 18 last year. It did pretty well, whereas X2 last year was number 11. So Asian Ica has never outranked X2, but prior to being number 18 in 2022, it didn't have a valid ranking the previous 2 years just because of ridership. It's one of those interesting things where if you were to look at the stats, it tells you that Asian Ica should be the better ride here. It's just a taller, faster, longer, more inversions version of X2. But this also might be a ridership crossover type of thing where you just have a lot of people who have ridden X2 and just not as many people who've ridden Asian Ica, and quite frankly, not enough people who've ridden both for there to really kind of be a correlation between those two here.
And I feel like with that ride too, I've heard that people have gone to Japan have a hard time getting on that one anyway. So,
well, Fuji Q is notorious for, there's sort of a saying that one must have a bad visit to Fuji Q before they have a good visit to Fuji Q. Like you almost have to go twice before you actually get on stuff.
yeah.
So that's interesting. Conventional wisdom here shows, conventional wisdom says Steel Vengeance and Fury are the two rides that are going to meet here in the group championship for a chance to go to the final four. But just like we said in one of the wood groups earlier tonight, this is one where these first round matchups, those other ones, Hyperion, Millennium Force, and X2 versus Asian Ica in particular, I'm going to wager that the winner of the contest this year is probably going to have at least one, if not both of those two matchups right. Those are 2 points that you need to have that a lot of people are probably not going to have, because those are going to be matchups where people are very, very split, and we'll probably see close to a 50-50 split. So those are two that I think you have to get right to win this contest here.
Yeah, and like I said, it seems deceptively easy, so it makes me wonder what exactly is going on there. So,
or is it just all the trickery and whatnot was located in the
maybe you
first
just
group?
felt nice about it, that one bracket. And
Well, I just ran out of trickery in the first three groups, and these are the 8 rides I was left with when I pulled all the nonsense here in the first
that's
group, like putting Maverick and Terran together, and G-Force and Conda, and the Hershey rides and the Virginia rides. I had nothing left to put up against each other. So this was the result here, right? Looking at Steel Vengeance is in this group. The defending champion here. And I think now that Steel Vengeance has been the champion again and is the defending champion again, I mean, is Steel Vengeance the favorite once again? Some argued it was still the favorite last year, even though it didn't win in 2021. It got beat by Velocicoaster,
yeah.
but 52% of the submissions last year had Iron Gwazi winning it. So one train of thought said that Gwazi was the favorite last year, but Steel Vengeance was the winner. So, the question is Steel Vengeance the favorite again this year? And do you see, the rides that are on that half of the bracket in the other group, G-Force, Conda, Ride to Happiness, Maverick, Terran, Taiga. Do you see a competitor for Vengeance before the championship from that other group, or is the only real contenders that might have a chance of taking down Vengeance on the other side, be it a Velocicoaster or an Untamed or a Wildcat or a Zadra?
I do feel that the main contenders, if you're going to be the man, you got to beat the man. I feel like the main contenders are outside of this bracket for Vengeance, and it's going to be interesting because I don't know. I keep talking about this, and I don't know if people are ready for what's going to happen here. And I don't know if I'm ready for what's going to happen here. I don't know if anyone's ready for what's going to happen here. I think this bracket and this, once we reveal the top 50 on each side of wood and steel, and more so the steel side than the wood side, this might be the biggest bloodbath we've ever witnessed inside of Thrilling 32 history.
Now, why do you say that?
I just have a feeling. I have a feeling. I do. I feel like, and I could be completely wrong about that. I could be completely wrong. I could be, and we could have, a standard, nothing really moves at all. That could absolutely happen. That we can go back and post the 2022 top 50 and be like, okay, we're just going to use that and we're going to be fine. I have a feeling that this might be, because there's deviousness afoot. There's deviousness afoot throughout the whole bracket. About that round in particular, makes me worried.
That is certain. That is for certain.
And I think I don't know. I'm looking at some of these matchups here. I'm looking at the whole bracket overall. I'm looking at some of these matches, and I'm just like, ooh, there's a lot of question marks this year. There are a lot of question marks that you're going to have to answer about where it's not only looking at previous years, it's answering the question of, now that we have valid ridership on a lot of these rides, and there's been valid ridership for a number of years on most of the rides.
It's not that the previous ones were invalid. It's just because you've now had a huge influx of voters or riders on so many of these rides.
And
right?
So many of those rides have a lot of people trying to justify thousands of dollars that they spent to go ride them. So you wonder, will that influence?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
No idea what you're talking about, but when you spend thousands, it's when you spend millions and billions of dollars building an atomic bomb, you kind of want to use it. So it's like you spend thousands of dollars on going to a European trip, you kind of want to rank them high all of a sudden.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a fair shout.
Probably not the best of examples, but whatever.
No, I wouldn't have made that analogy, but you did. So I don't know.
Use another hate mail my way, I guess. I don't know.
So quick locational distribution here on the steel side. So of the 32 steel coasters, only 16, exactly half, are from the United States, 3 each from Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, 2 from Florida, and 1 each from California, Georgia, North Carolina, technically, Tennessee, and Texas. We have 1 each from England, Finland, the Netherlands, Spain, and Sweden. We have 2 each from Belgium and Japan, 3 from Poland, and 4 from Germany.
Wow, that's quite the spread.
It's a very nice spread. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 countries represented, including the United States, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 U.S. states represented just on the steel side of things. We did the wood breakdown earlier. So, I think the biggest takeaway from doing these 2 brackets here, and the steel in particular, I think the question you most often need to ask yourself is, do you believe that a particular ride will hold where it ranked last year? Because there's several examples of rides that were either new to the Thrilling 32 last year or new in general last year. And I'm not just talking about the rides at the top, right? I mean, yeah, Taiga was really high last year. Kondo was really high last year. And those are rides that certainly you have to consider. But there's other rides that, you have to Zadra on the other side of things, and Hyperion. Do you believe that last year's rankings were valid? Or do you think there's going to be a huge jump and those rides might contend? Even a ride like Pantheon, right, was right in the middle of the pack last year. Do you think Pantheon's a ride that could go up? Do you think it's a ride that could experience the second year settling that we always talk about? Same thing with Intimidator 305. Huge drop last year. Do you think we saw this with Millennium Force years ago, where Millennium Force had a big drop and was beaten by Phantom's Revenge the one year, and then Millennium Force jumped back up to the top 5 the following year. Could Intimidator 305 see that type of thing happen? I think it's within, I think it's in the range of outcomes for that to happen here. And you never know, like a ride like Iron Rattler was, a perennial top 10 ride and it only recently started to fall down. Who's to say that ride doesn't jump back up? I think it's all in the range of outcomes there. And I think, we saw Asian Ica in last year. We didn't see Flying Dinosaur in last year. So does Flying Dinosaur being in this year make you think that more people have ridden Asian Ica and maybe that ride's going to see an unexpected jump that you might not be able to predict? And then you've got the new rides like Airy Force One and Wildcat's Revenge that you got to think about. Somehow we kind of glossed over those 2 rides a little bit,
right?
In this whole discussion, it seems like forever ago that we talked about those 2 rides. In the wood coasters, you've got much less to think about in those terms. I really liked how the wood and steel brackets over the last 5 years have really become completely different challenges. And we've talked about combining everything into one bracket, but I really do like the distinct difference between the wood bracket and the steel bracket and the different challenges that those present. The wood coasters, as we mentioned, 30 of the 32 rides from last year's are in this year. Only 2 fell out. So it's not a matter of trying to figure out where the new rides are going because there's not any new wood coasters being built.
Yeah,
it's
right.
trying to figure out the nuancy changes that are affected by either people going to new parks or people going back to old parks because other new rides have opened and changing their rankings of the wood coasters. That's the fascinating challenge that the wood bracket presents. And the steel bracket presents a whole different set of problems where you've got new rides. You've got rides that haven't been in before because a lot of new people have gone to ride them. You've got influx of voters on these rides that you've seen only for the first or second time, like a Conda, like a Taiga, like a Fly, like a Ride 10 Happiness. All those rides that continue to get new riders every single year and trying to figure out what's going to happen. Are they going to rise? Are they going to fall? We've seen both happen in the past. I really, really enjoy the 2 distinct challenges that these 2 brackets offer.
Well, and I feel like this year in particular, where I think we were kind of settling in, maybe even on the steel side, just a tad, I feel that there are a number of new coasters, at least going into Europe, that's really upsetting the apple cart a little bit for the steel side. And not having ridden a whole lot of them, you really have to decipher, well, what's really going on here? Are these really that great of rides? Are they just being overranked? Are they somewhere in the middle? So there's a lot of, you're going to do a lot of critical thinking, and even people who have been on the rides, you're going to have to weigh that with people who haven't been on the rides and how they ultimately fall on this list. And we've seen the history. You have the histories in front of you. You know where they go. Now, adding a whole bunch of new riders, does that change things? I don't know. I don't think we've ever had this many coasters with this many question marks next to them. Because even when you guys did like the European trips before through England doesn't have, like, you have your Nemesises and your Smilers and some of your other coasters. And you went to Germany and you have the Phantasialand coasters, but even those, like your Terrans, I think even those. But now you start hitting some of these other parks with, especially in the places you just went with Scandinavia and Poland, and them being a lot newer. I think that's the other nuance here as well, that you look at things like Europa and Phantasialand, and a lot of the stuff was older rides, more classic
They've become
rides.
passe, right? Because everybody's been to those now. It's the same thing that we had in the States 5 years ago.
And honestly, if you build a ride 20 years ago, yeah, it's going to compete with some of the rides today, but it has to be a really great ride 20 years ago to still compete, just like Raptor. It's still amazing. So it still competes, number one. I'm curious as to why we didn't talk about it here tonight. Still, once again, like 15 years in a row, we haven't talked about it. But anyway, but now you're talking about riding rides in these different places that are also built in the last 2 or 3 years, which I think completely changes the discussion. So you're almost talking about that first year ridership when these big groups go through and they start voting in this poll. It's almost like being a brand new coaster. And will you see that jump there? I don't know. Or are they already settled in because you already have that base of voters who have already ridden them? Are they already settled in and that jump's not as high? I don't know what's going to happen, but I feel like this year in particular, there are so many question marks against so many roller coasters that I don't know how the hell you're going to do it, but good fucking luck.
Well, that's it. And you know what? The nice thing, well, maybe it's a nice thing. I don't know if you think it's so nice, but I don't think this is coming to an end anytime soon here either, because unlike in the United States, we're getting some cool stuff next year. But there's some cool stuff that's coming to Europe. I mean, we're getting cool stuff, but we're not getting like, oh my God, like blow your mind stuff. Like over in Europe now, we missed out.
You're really excited about that penguin ride, I take it.
No, I'm looking forward to the Vekoma Super Boomerang at Great Adventure, and I'll tell you why. We rode a number of damn good Vekoma coasters over there on this trip in particular. Now, unfortunately, we did miss out on Phoenix at Far Up Summerland because of a 100-year hurricane that decided to come through that day. But we rode Lek Coaster, which is in the Thrilling 32. We rode Abyssus at Energylandia, which is a damn good ride as well. There's lots of other rides like that are popping up. And we'll see them at the end of this thing where they ended up ranking. But a couple of rides not in the Thrilling 32 that were in the top 50. Tutatis from Parc Asterix that just opened. Rides like Junker at Powerland, which are pretty darn good. Even Guardians of the Galaxy will make an appearance in the top 50, and that's still pretty darn new. So and Europa Park is opening up Voltron, and that looks like one hell of a ride coming up. I mean, there's still going to be a lot to think about in the coming years. So, like you said,
not this half of the world so much.
Well, right, yes. the steel coasters,
the Pescetio coasters. I don't know if they're going to be making an appearance.
Those are less interesting.
We'll see if they get open first. That's the first step.
We'll see if they can stay open too without stuff falling off of them. Right. But the steel coasters, I think, are going to remain fluid for the foreseeable future. Maybe to your dismay, mostly because of European rides. But I
feel like it also matters on how many Alex Baker's friends. Does he even have friends over there? How many have they voted?
I don't know. I don't know. Was there an influx of voters from England? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Do you know a bunch of English voters all of a sudden? Because then I try follow.
Yeah. So I think that'll just about do it. We have to tell people where to go and how to participate, right? Do you have any final thoughts before we do that?
Like I said, this is not the year I would want to be participating. So
no, if this is your first year, it might actually be better if it's your first year and you don't have the bias of previous years.
You don't have the bias. You come in completely new and you just pick cool rides, and you might be okay with that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why. So it's going to be interesting to see how you guys adapt to this new bracket format. Old bracket format, I guess.
It's a relocation from the Six Flags Ride Rotation Program. It's new to you.
It's new to you. It's new to you.
So yes. So we're not doing it through Google Forms this year. We're actually running it through Qualtrics. Qualtrics has a free setup, and we're gonna do it a little bit differently. I'm still at the time of recording, I'm still actually doing some buttoning up with it. But we'll have the link in the description of this video once it finally drops. And I think, will you also put it on thrilling32.com where you'll put
I will
the link
try
there?
and do that. Yeah.
Okay. So there should be a link like either vote now or participate here or whatever it is, and you click on that, it'll take you to the Qualtrics survey. The nice thing with Qualtrics is it actually does a little bit more policing, which we previously had to do manually. It'll make sure that you can only submit one bracket because we've had that issue in the past.
I've had that
So
issue.
there's a way that it keeps you from doing that. And I think the way I'm going to try and set it up is such that all 32 rides will be listed together and they'll be in columns of they're like a left column and a right column. And I'll try and have the head-to-heads side by side so that you only have to pick one from either the left column or the right column. And the way that it should be set up, I have to test this out yet, but it should carry your responses forward. So in the first round, the 16 rides that you pick in the first round should carry forward to the next round, and you should have those to pick from to pick your next 8. Pay attention to the brackets. The bracket images will be in the form. So make sure you're paying attention to that and you're picking the right coasters from the right matchups, because we've had that happen before when we had the type-in responses where people were putting the wrong
Whatever they wanted
posters in the wrong blocks and they were just making shit up, and that's not how it works. So make sure you're paying attention to how the brackets, cascade down and where your winners line up when you're filling it out. We'll make it as easy as possible, but this is the first time we're using Qualtrics to do this. So hopefully it's pretty easy. Give us your feedback on whether or not you like the Qualtrics survey, or if you want us to go back to the Google form. And we're also going to do a little bit extra too. We're going to ask you what influenced some of your choices, whether or not you were using previous year's rankings or your own rankings, or if you were just guessing and you had no idea. That's certainly an option too. So we're interested in learning that as well, so we can talk about why people made some of the dumb choices they decided to make when their brackets. So that'll be up by the time this show is over and ready to go. I don't think we've established. Usually we give about 2 weeks to do the brackets.
Yeah.
So I would say it would definitely give you at least a week to 10 days. So I don't know when exactly this is going to drop yet, but certainly do it in the first week. You'll probably have closer to 2 weeks, but try and get it done in the first week from this video dropping, and you'll definitely be in there. We'll be posting on the Facebook group, and we'll be trying to post everywhere we can to let you know when the deadline is, but try and get it done in that first week to 10 days and you should be good. Again, going back to the old format, 1 point for the first round, 2 points, 4 points, 8 points for subsequent rounds, and then 16 points for having your champion correct. And then our tiebreaker questions will be in there as well. So we've got our 64 rides. We've got our thrilling 32 wood, our thrilling 32 steel. Andy, any final comments before we leave the people to grovel in the...
We are off to the races. We are here, and we're going to have some fun revealing the winners here and seeing the shocked responses in the comments.
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait.
This is going to be crazy, and it's going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy. There's a lot of... I just can't wait to hear the responses when we reveal this show. It's always my favorite time to watch, because we're going to, you're obviously seeing, we're doing a live show, doing a live drop. I love reading the comments over here. Hopefully you guys have been great. I don't know. I'm going to predict we're going to be great. We'll see.
All 4 people that showed up, thank you.
So hopefully we got at least 4 in there now, because otherwise it's be really embarrassing if we don't have at least 4 there, but whatever. So we're off to the races. So thank you for joining us here for our favorite time of year, the thrilling 32 and the Ride Warrior Choice Awards. The thrilling 32 bracket challenge is back, and we are officially off to the races right now. So go fill out your forms, start crying over all the choices you have to make. And as always, I am, of course, Andrew Barczyk from Chicago, Illinois.
I am Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York. The hate mail about the matchups can come to me. The hate mail about the atomic bomb comment can go to Andy.
Can go to me. But true. You don't like it, it's still true. It's why we dropped them. So, as always, right on, Ride Warriors.
Thanks, guys. Good luck. You're going to need it.
Oh, you're going to need it.